Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections. It's your girl, Charlene. I am so happy to see you again. I know that, it's been a while since we've seen each other, but thank you for taking this ride with me. Today, we have an excellent episode for you. So sit back, relax if you're driving. Put through your speakers and just vibe with me because we're about to go on a journey. And like my favorite minister, Minister Kevin Ewing, we are going to put on our scuba gear because we are about to dive deep, guys. We are going deep sea diving today. Our topic, the Black conservative. Ooh, touchy topic, touchy topic. Yes, guys. Now, before we start, I just want to welcome you back. Thank you for being so patient with me. It's super hard when you want to put together content that is actually intellectual and has something that people can walk away with. You can't just like spew out stuff every day, right? Like, so I see a lot of my fellow YouTubians who are out there making a lot of great content, have millions of views, and we're on this little small platform just vibing with each other. And I'm taking my sweet old time. Yes, this is season 2. This is episode 3. Thank you for tuning in for episode 1 and 2 and for tuning in to season 1. As you know, Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections is an authentic platform with a professional twist. Or, excuse me, said that backwards, a professional platform with an authentic twist. Our goal here is to uplift the voices of people of color in this country and especially in the workplace because, as you know, some of us are navigating spaces and we're literally navigating them with a mask on. So today we're going to take the mask off like Future. So before I start, I have to do all of the YouTube logistics. So the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, commenting, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit educational or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So I want to make sure that I make that disclaimer because I want everybody to understand that we're legit here doing the research, having the conversation, and people's authentic property or copywritten property, that's their property. But today we're going to have like a little bit of a different format. So I just want to start off with that. Once again, like I said, welcome back, right? Like we're here to chit, we're here to chat, and we're on a professional platform with this authentic twist. So if this is the first time that you're experiencing Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections, get ready to put on your scuba gear because we're about to take some deep dives into some unpopular or regarded as abnormal. And quite frankly, these topics are topics that are going to cause you to ponder. They're going to cause you to think. They're going to cause you to, understand other perspectives and have different perceptions around things. So in season 1, we went through the basics of 101. So if you have some time, go back, take some review. I will be using a lot of terminology, and a lot of this terminology will be related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and most importantly, anti-racism and Black liberation. That's coming down the pipeline as well. There's a national conversation about DEI being separate from social justice. I mean, there's a lot going on in the realms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you know, Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections will bring it to you and we will have an authentic conversation around it. So, like I said, I'm going to be talking really fast. I'm going to try to talk slow. Today might be a long one. I'm going to try to get through this material as quickly as possible with enough context so that you walk away with something. But today, I want to give you some definitions before I just jump into stuff. So today's topic is really a touchy topic, and I feel like I say that for every single episode, but it may arouse some feelings that are synonymous with anger, or some of you might even be happy, like, yes, the Black conservative, talk about it. It depends on which side you're on. And as you know, we live in such a polarized environment. It's usually a dichotomous environment where you're either on this side or you're on that side. You're on the left, you're on the right. You're conservative, you're liberal. There's no gray area with some of these topics. But just know, here at Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections, we're not looking to give you like a black or white perspective. We're looking to give you the gray. So We will be discussing the Black conservative. Ooh, what is that? Who is that? And why they got to be called that? Child, we are digging deep today. I have a format that we'll be using to expound on today's topic and give us some meat and potatoes instead of just flying off the cuff about topics that we're not familiar with. Okay. So let's get familiar with the Black conservative. Honey, today is going to be a good one. So let's get into it. Here's the format for the day. We will discuss the Black bourgeoisie and its difference or similarities to the Black conservative. We'll figure out whether or not they're interchangeably different or they're interchangeably the same. Coonery. Ooh, I said it. Yeah, we're going to be discussing coonery. And we're going to close out on intellectualism. All right. So we'll watch a video for intellectual purposes of a group of young conservatives debating about young liberals. And we're really going to discuss the Carlton Bankses and the Hillary Bankses of America, right? So it's going to get juicy. So I ran this topic against my cousin. I was like, look, I'm going to do the Black conservative. I've been studying and researching for like 3 weeks now. And she was like, oh, the Black bourgeoisie. And I was like, there's a difference. And she was like, you mean Carlton and Hillary? And I was like, yes, precisely. So shout out to you, Sam. I got to give my cousin some props on that. I'm not taking her ideas. I'm sharing them with you guys and obviously crediting where credit is due. So the Black conservative, right, as we get into this, is also known as the Black Republican. Dun, dun, dun. So I want to begin by quoting Angela K. Lewis in her article in the Journal of the African American Studies, Volume 8, Spring 2005. She states, current discussions about Black conservatism lack historical perspective. They assume that conservatism in the Black community is a new phenomenon. However, the assumption ignores a large literature that discussed the history of Blacks and the political thought of major Black intellectuals who expose a conservative ideology. Guys, this is not new. I mean, for some reason, this generation feels like anything that they just found out about is new. There's never any thought as to whether or not there was historical context to that. So today we're going to antagonize that ideology. And we're going to say, look, the Black conservative, i.e. the Black Republican, dun, 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 is not a new ideology. So what is conservatism? Conservatism, right? Because we're going to lay down the foundation. As you guys know, we're going to put on our scuba gear. But before we put on our scuba gear, we have to lay the foundation. So what is conservatism? Conservatism is known as the commitment to traditional values and ideas with opposition to change or innovation. It's the holding of a political view that favors free enterprise, private ownership, and socially traditional ideas. Conservatism is a cultural, social, and political philosophy that seeks to promote and to preserve traditional social institutions and practices. The central tenets of conservatism may vary in relation to the status quo of the culture and the civilization in which it appears. So, in the context of America, we will be talking about conservatism as conservative versus liberal, Democrat versus Republican. But conservatism can show up in different ways. Now, I don't have a good example at this moment, but I know you guys are out there thinking in your mind, what would be the equivalent of a conservative in a culture that I've been exposed to versus the liberal ideology or the liberal lens? All right. So you guys take that moment. I usually have good examples. Today is not one of them because I really just want to get to the meat and bones of this, to the nitty gritty. So let's move on. Republican. So during the 19th century, okay, so we know our context, right? Let's back up. We know our context. We know that we're looking at a conservative lens versus a liberal lens. And in the context of America, that is Democrat and Republican, right? So the Republican Party, right, in the 19th century stood against the extension of slavery into the country's new territories and ultimately for slavery's complete abolition. So most abolitionists in the 19th century were, in fact, Republican. So during the 20th and 21st century, the party became associated with the laissez-faire capitalism. Be free, do as you want, acquire as many properties as you like, buy as many railroads as you'd like, have as many businesses as you'd like. Laissez-faire, right? You came to America and you can live the American dream. And that included low taxes and conservative social policies, right? And the party acquired the acronym GOP, widely understood as Grand Old Party in the 1870s, right? So now I'm gonna flip a little bit and we're gonna talk about the Black conservative. So the Black Republican. So African Americans fighting for an alternative economic and civil rights movement, even as the Republican Party appears increasingly hostile to that very idea, the Black Party members attempted to influence the direction of conservatism and not to destroy it, but rather to expand the ideology to include Black needs and interests. Okay? So when we're talking about the Black conservative, a lot of it is expanding the idea of conservatism in the context of America to also include Black needs and interests. So the Democratic Party. Now, I felt like I should have put that in there, but we will expound a little bit more. Just follow me. Stay with your girl. Remember, put on your scuba gear. Like you should be like strapping in your goggles so you can get ready. Right. So the Democratic Party is generally associated with a more progressive policy, right? Like more progressive policies, more progressive lens, more progressive ideology. And it supports social and economic equality, favoring greater government intervention in the economy, but opposing government involvement in the private, non-economic affairs of citizens. So Democrats advocate for the civil rights of minorities, and they support a safety net for individuals backing various social welfare programs, including Medicaid and food stamps. And to fund these programs and other initiatives, Democrats often endorse a progressive tax. And in addition to that, Democrats notably support environmental protection programs, gun control, less strict immigration laws, and workers' rights. Sounds all great, right? Like, sounds like a form of socialism in some ways, where one man helps the other man. Now, let's talk about the history of the Democrats. So the Democratic Party has changed significantly during its more than 2 centuries of existence. And during the 19th century, remember, we learned about the abolitionist Republican Party in the 19th century. Now we're learning about the Democratic Party in the 19th century. In the 19th century, the party supported or tolerated slavery, and it opposed civil rights reforms after the American Civil War. And in order to retain the support of Southern voters, it made sure to be very vocal about its stance. So by the mid-20th century, it had undergone a dramatic ideological realignment and reinvented itself as a party supporting organized labor, supporting the civil rights minorities, and progressive reform. And since President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal in 1930, the party has also tended to favor greater government intervention in the economy and to oppose government intervention in private and non-economic affairs of citizens. So let's talk a little bit. First, let's just chill for a second, because that's a lot. That's a lot of information. And I also slipped in there what the Black Republican is seeking. The Black Democrat, obviously, I'm not going to place my own thoughts on it. I just want to present you with the information, because technically, if you are a Democrat, you are for bigger government, bigger government intervention in the economy, less government intervention in private and non-economic affairs of the citizens. You're in favor of the civil rights of minorities. You're in favor of organized labor and all of these other things. And not that the Republicans are not in favor of that, but they're more in favor of free enterprise and a free market economy. So let's talk about the difference in Democrats and Republicans for a second. So Democrats are generally considered liberal, while Republicans are seen as conservative. And the Democratic Party typically supports a larger government role in economic issues, backing regulations and social welfare programs. So you're thinking Democrats, you're thinking social welfare, bigger government. The Republicans, however, typically want a smaller government that is less involved in the economy. The contrary view on the size of government is reflected in their position on taxes. So Democrats favor a progressive tax to finance the expansion of the government's role, whereas Republicans support lower taxes for all. However, Republicans do support a large budget for the military, and they often aggressively pursue U.S. national security interests, even if that means acting unilaterally. Okay. So if they're like the only ones voting for that, that is totally fine for them. And as long as they have the majority vote, they will go ahead and move forward. Democrats, on the other hand, prefer multilateralism. So we're looking at all different types of people, all different types of power that go across government, moving in this one direction. Whereas Republicans are like smaller government, whoever's in government and has the majority makes the decision. Okay, so on social issues, Democrats seek greater freedoms while Republicans follow more traditional values, supporting government intervention in such matters, right? So, for example, Democrats generally back abortion rights while Republicans don't. And in terms of geography, Democrats typically dominate in larger cities, while Republicans are especially popular in rural areas. So that's a lot to digest. And I have a lot of different thoughts, but I don't want to put my ideologies in there or my ideas. I want you guys to just digest what we just heard, right? The difference between the Democrat and the Republican, the difference between the social backing of policies, the difference between bigger government versus smaller government. I want us to understand that, like, a lot of the decisions that are made in terms of how we experience systems in America is based off of these two ideologies and lenses moving forward with creating policy and creating systems and creating the procedures that people operate in. Right. So if we don't understand that at its fundamental, then we are just choosing candidates based off of whether or not we like them or based off of whether or not we live, in a democratic state. And if my city's democratic, so I should vote Democratic, or my city's Republican, I should vote Republican. We're not necessarily voting with an intellectual mind or an intellectual lens to move legislation forward that aligns with our own experiences. So that's the purpose of me like laying down this foundation for us, right? So all of these sources were from Britannica, which is the encyclopedia, guys, and it is a great resource. It's still out there. Remember when grandma used to have like the big encyclopedia books and she had every single one, or she was waiting for one to come, or I would just sit there and read through them. I mean, it still exists. So you can go online and go to encyclopediabritannica.com, and all of these amazing credible sources for information are available. Now, I will say I always try to juxtapose my information to another credible source, because as you can see in some of the literature that I just was able to share with you, the person writing may or may not have had a bias, and it can show. So make sure you juxtapose lived experiences along with people who are scholars, along with, encyclopedia information. I wouldn't say Wikipedia, but just understand that there's more information out there, and I would take all of them and create my own lens from there. So don't take one thing as solid gold. I use Encyclopedia Britannica for the purposes of this podcast and to illustrate a story. So guys, understand that is what's happening all over the internet. So make sure you do your due diligence to do your own research. But yes, I wanted to make sure that I give you guys the source. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Black bourgeoisie. That word is so hard to spell. My goodness. I was butchering that word, child. The Black bourgeoisie versus the Black conservative. So while I was doing my research, I was like, man, is there a difference? Like, most of the time, those are synonymous with each other. When you hear people talking about the Black conservative, the first thing they go to is rich Black people, because everybody thinks that a rich Black person is a Republican or conservative. But let's get into some deepness, right? So according to the African American Registry, the Black bourgeoisie is America's Black upper class based on financial income. Now, this piece was bold for me, right? Like, I bolded this in my own, as I was taking notes in my own research, I bolded this for myself because I'm like, okay, financial income. So we read about the Republican and the Democratic Party, and we read that it had nothing to do with finances and everything to do with policy, bigger government, and the backing of a free market or intervention of government in citizens' lives. The bourgeoisie, however, are based on financial income. So the Black bourgeoisie consists of engineers and lawyers and accountants and doctors and politicians and business executives and venture capitalists and CEOs and celebrities and entertainers and entrepreneurs and heirs who have annual incomes amounting to $200,000 or more a year. Well, annual income. All right. This social class is sometimes referred to as the Black upper class, the Black middle class, or the Black elite. And this represents less than 1% of the total Black population in the United States. See, now this is the piece that makes me so mad, because I literally just had a conversation today with a beautiful Black woman who is highly educated, highly capable. I mean, she is just absolutely amazing. And she went up for a candidacy to be a CEO of a nonprofit, national nonprofit that was located in the area that I live in. And she didn't get the position. She lost out to a white man. And I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to make like this color thing or, I was highly triggered when somebody told me I had the Mariah Carey version of DEI because I believe in Black liberation. But I don't want to always look at things as color. I'm going to look at things as qualifications. My sis legit ran laps around this white man when it came to qualifications. And she was outchosen, which we all could possibly think, because he's a white man and he fits the look that they were looking for, perhaps, right? Because when she asked for feedback, they were incapable of providing her with that feedback. So it wasn't that she did anything wrong, it was the fit, right? So I say all that to say, this Black woman who is clearly 100% qualified for the position, running laps against her competition, would lose out because she doesn't fit what they were looking for. And this position is obviously what you would call Black elite, Black upper middle class, Black upper class position, because she would be making $200,000 or more. But in that moment, she would only be 1%, less than 1% of the total Black population in the United States. I don't know if you guys remember in season 1, I talked about looking out for each other and being able to uplift one another in terms of salary and positions. And when you have a position, you're supposed to bring your community with you. So just thinking that $200,000 in the scope of things, how many of us have student loan debt and things like that? 200,000 is not that much. It's not unattainable, but it's less than 1% of the Black population in the United States. I had to go on that rant because I just had a conversation with my good sis, and okay, back to the Black bourgeoisie. She would have been a Black bourgeoisie. I might not be her friend then, right? Not just kidding. Okay, so This group of Blacks has a history of organizations and activities that distinguish it from other classes within the Black community, as well as the white American upper class. Many of these traditions, which have persisted for several generations, are discussed in Lawrence Otis's 2000 book, Our Kind of People, Inside America's Black Upper Class. And just to give a little historical context, when enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas in the 17th and 18th centuries, there began to be mixed race children of the Black African and white European descent in the Americas. And they were called the mulattoes, right? And they were sometimes enslaved by their white slaveholding fathers and comprised of a large part of the free Black population in antebellum South. So I'm giving you a historical context as to how the Black bourgeoisie came about. All right. In addition, some Blacks escaped to freedom during the American Revolution, and others were manipulated by their enslavers. So the free Black community in the U.S. had therefore increased by 1800. And although most were very poor, some were able to own farmland and to learn mechanical or artistic trades. And other former slaves, often mixed race house slaves, who shared ancestry with their one-time owners and had acquired marketable skills such as cooking and tailoring and working in domestic fields, were able to open small businesses and even newspapers. So they were able to get a head start on Blacks who were essentially still enslaved by their lack of access to wealth accumulation, and particularly when it came to owning their own land. All right, so I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of story time. So I had a mulatto, and I'm just using that term. We know that that term has turned into mixed race or biracial. I had a biracial coworker who was going to an event, and she had done an event previously, and there were like those croc charms, and the croc charms had little Black faces on them. They were very affirming to little Black kids and little Latino kids and little Hispanic kids. And she came to me and she's like, look, like, I want to affirm the white kids' identities as well, because I saw that the white kids felt left out when all the little Black kids were able to get the little croc charms that look like them. And so this is the same individual who currently is tasked with being the representation of their Black peers in spaces of leadership. Now, I explicitly said to this person that I believe that they're wrong. I feel like white people are consistently affirmed in their identity. So that is a notion that is actually false when it came to that little child. And perhaps the conversation should be, it's okay for you to feel in this moment that there's another little kid who's affirmed in their identity. That's a conversation that needs to happen with their parents, right? Because I had the total opposite. When the little white kids came to the table for the little croc charms, they weren't looking for pictures of themselves. They were looking for the strawberries and the fist and and the Pokemon and the Spider-Man and all the other things. There was never a conversation as to whether or not their identities needed to be affirmed in that moment. But this was the duality for this particular individual, where they can be in their privilege, right? Because they're half white, while also understanding that their Black identity, excuse me, their Black identity needs to be affirmed. So they don't even know how to deal with that. There's like a juxtapose of it. Now, I say all that to say this head start on Blacks who were enslaved by their lack of access to wealth and accumulation, this mulatto individual could say, well, I can open up my business because I can get a head start, and I'm affirmed in that, and I'm cool because they have that white perspective, that white lens. Whereas someone who was still enslaved and didn't learn any skills, or the skills that they learned were just not easily accessible for business ownership, at that time would have a harder time moving into a space of accumulating wealth. And so it's funny that I was reading this and doing this research, and then in that very moment, I was told that little white kids needed to be affirmed in their identities because they looked sad because they didn't have a face that was white on a crack charm. It just made me have a lot of different thoughts. And I'm not saying little white kids cannot be affirmed in their identity, but little white kids don't have anything that strips them of their identity, right? Like, white kids are afforded a lot of different things. They have a lot of access and a lot of capital and a lot of ways to navigate society without even thinking that they're white. And I think she missed that the reason for the crack charms having the identities of little black and brown children was because little black and brown children don't have access to that. So, nevertheless, anyway, you guys know I love my stories. I love to share them with you. My lived experience is crazy in comparison to all of the things that I research and the ways in which I try to articulate how systemic oppression shows up, how affirmations have to happen, how identities are developed, and so on and so forth. It's crazy. My lived experiences, Lord, I got stories for days. So nevertheless, apart from some classic Black bourgeoisie perspectives, and those being a head start, making $200,000 a year, being of the Black elites, I wanted to give us like a juxtapose of what the Black bourgeoisie and the Black conservatives look like, right? So apart from some of the classic Black bourgeoisie perspectives, Black conservative intellectuals, that was also a term that was very synonymous with the Black conservative, is this intellectual piece. That's why we're going to go into intellectualism at the end of this podcast, because I wanted to show us I wanted to bring us through a journey. So they also consistently demonstrate that they have personally internalized negative stereotypes about poor Blacks and about African American culture. The evidence for this lies in the underlying assumptions of their written word and the descriptions of poor Blacks in that work and their personal biographies. So here are a few observations about the Black middle class, right? So what that author was trying to say was that the Black bourgeoisie looks down on the poor. As I was saying, the affirmation of identity looks different based on access to resources. And so the Black bourgeoisie would look at the poor Black as, the less than. African American culture as I don't want to associate or assimilate myself with that, such as the biracial girl saying, oh, we need croc charms for little white kids, right? These are all ways that you can see the Black bourgeois, and I'm not saying that particular individual is, just using this as an example, separates themselves from the identities of Blackness, right? Because once you have gotten into Black elite, now there is this monolith of Blackness. And if you don't fit into that monolith, you are outcasted. All right. So these were some of the observations that this author wanted us to walk away with. Homophobia and anti-gay attitudes are pervasive, as seen by the fact that many Black Americans are anti-gay marriage. Affirmative action policies, though it helped many ascend to middle class status, are no longer needed. Right? Black politicians are needed to protect the economic status of the Black middle class, not to speak out about social justice. Black liberals, they have no focus and can no longer speak for the bourgeoisie Black middle class. Intra-racism has long been the standard among Blacks of different shades of Blackness. But as you know, if you watched us from season 1, you know I went through Willie Lynch, Letter to a Slave, and we learned where that intra-racism came from. It's from the domestication of slaves, all right? And it was the psychological warfare that was unleashed on the slaves at that time. So the academic, the underachievement is the result of the Black home, not institutional problems such as racism dating back to Jim Crow. So the Black bourgeoisie and the Black intellectual overlap in some ways. And these are some of the ideologies that they overlap in. But really specifically, the Black bourgeoisie holds these as a means to separate themselves from the Black plight. Okay? So although they have a clear way of connecting the two, right, I will argue that the Black bourgeoisie is significantly different than the Black conservative. I will acknowledge that there are some overlapping characteristics, such as affluence and the need to preserve the capitalistic view. However, I find that the Black conservative is more focused on legislation versus finances. So hear me out, okay? So let's explore the aforementioned Black conservative definition to be. So African Americans fighting for an alternative economic and civil rights movement, even as the Republican Party seems to be increasingly hostile to that very idea, Black Party members of the Republican Party attempt to influence the direction of conservatism, not to destroy it, but rather to expand the ideology to include the needs and interests of Black folks everywhere. Okay? So, despite its seeming novelty and the monolithic nature of its contemporary precepts, Black conservatism has a history that reaches back to at least the late 18th century and is capacious enough to include figures as diverse as Frederick Douglass, Zora Neale Hurston, who's my boo, Malcolm X, and Bill Cosby. Speaks a lot about Bill Cosby. And I talked about Bill Cosby the other day, but anyway, let me be quiet. The tradition, often but not exclusively for people by the middle class, constellates around three key features. All right. So we're going to go through three key features about the Black conservative as we start to move through. The first is a deep desire for racial autonomy that, in being effective, will ultimately result in personal independence. All right. So that's the first feature. In short, Black conservatives take citizens' constitutional prerogative to pursue happiness very seriously. All right. And we're going to see that in some of the videos I'm going to show. The second is a commitment to obliterate race as a limiting factor or indexal feature of human achievement. So the Black conservative, towards this end, they're quick to, refute that African life is producing a defense posture, right? That is impelled by Ralph Ellison to famously question, can a people live and develop for over 300 years simply by reacting to white racism? And if you guys know, Ralph Ellison is my dude. Invisible Man was amazing. I did an ode to Martin Luther King, and we read some of Ralph Ellison. So another Black conservative, very eloquent. So race should not be a limiting factor to your future as a human achievement. The Black conservative believes that I am American, but I'm navigating as a Black American, but that me being Black shouldn't stop me from doing anything. All right. And so Ellison antagonizes that idea, right? That idea of, I'm Black, so I have the plight. Can a people live and develop for over 300 years simply reacting to white racism? So it's like, my existence cannot be rooted in racism, in white racism. My existence needs to be rooted in who I am, the content of my character, and how I decide to navigate in that. It can't be just I'm Black, I'm poor, I'm Black, I'm disenfranchised, I'm Black, I'm historically ignored. There has to be some type of autonomy at some point. All right. So the third concept is a compulsion towards social respectability, one that includes obedience to society's laws, a hearty work ethic, religious piety, family values, sexual morality, a kind of role model politics that, if unable to exemplify admirable Black behavior to other Blacks, would at least prevent the race from being embarrassed in the eyes of the white American public. I know that. I laugh and giggle because it could be triggering, depending on what side you're on. Or you could be like, yes, that's what I'm talking about, right? So I read that again. The third part is a social respectability, one that includes obedience to society's laws. You have a hearty work ethic. You have religious piety. You have family values. You're sexually moral. And you're like this kind of role model in politics that even if you're unable to exemplify the admirable Black behavior to other Blacks, right, you would at least prevent the race from being embarrassed in the eyes of the white American public. So basically, you are a representative of the Black community every time you leave your home. And that representative must be excellent in everything that they do. So Black conservatism saw racially homogenous business relations, education, and religious life as an existential and economic antidote to their social marginalization, thus creating the irony that the lion's share of this epic's Black conservative politics preferred radical opposition to the will of the American mainstream. So they believe, right, that racially homogenous business relations, education, and religious life is the antidote to social marginalization. So they're basically saying if race is taken out of the context, and I'm just looked at as Charlene, business owner of imanaborenainc, this is who I am, right? And I just get to navigate freely, not off of my race, but of the content of my character, my work ethic, my religious life, my education, mainly how white people navigate, then it's the antidote, right? It's the antidote to the social marginalization that we face as people of color. And it is the radical opposition to the will of the American mainstream, meaning the American mainstream continues to fuel us with this polarized view of Black and white. Thus, it keeps systemic oppression alive. Thus, we all have to navigate in systemic oppression. And then that causes marginalization of groups and so on and so forth. So the Black conservatives is like, do away with all of that, antagonize that, completely obliterate that, and look at me as an American who's Black, or an American who's Latina, or an American who's Hispanic, and allow me to navigate as that, not a Black American, not a Hispanic American, not a Latino American, where my color precedes my Americanness. All right. So I wanted to read some stuff. I wanted to introduce you guys to Thomas Sowell and talk about American individualism and non-interventionist government. But I think, no, matter of fact, I'll read it. So Thomas Sewell, Shelby Steele, Alan Keyes, Angela McGlowan found in the passing of civil rights legislation in the 1960s the indisputable end of racism. They found it to be, that's it. Racism is over. We got a civil rights legislation passed. Like, you shouldn't be navigating with race anymore. With race no longer impeding Black accomplishment, these commentators encourage African Americans to defrock themselves of longstanding resentments about discrimination and embrace what they see as a future of unlimited opportunity. All right. So bent on preventing past Black victimization from entering contemporary discussions about social justice, today's Black conservatives saturate the public discussion with diatribes about Black victimization in the present, which they believe come in the form of government welfare programs that allegedly enfeeble Black ambition and limit Black achievement. They claim that whatever Black failure persists does not so because of the dependent lower class culture that some programs perpetuate. So I watched the documentary, right? So this is taking race out of it. We got civil rights. There is no such thing as race anymore. Don't be a victim. Have ownership over yourself and navigate in this unlimited opportunity, this land of unlimited opportunity without discrimination, right? Without embracing discrimination. So I watched this documentary, The End of the Black Family, in 1986. I mean, the year, I don't know. Don't tell anybody my age. And so they were talking about once welfare programs were introduced to the Black communities, the Black family began to dismantle. There was one scene of the documentary where they sat with like 15 women and they all were single mothers, and the mothers were, and they were like, do you think you need a man in the home? And the women were like, no, I don't need a man. I don't care. I don't need no man. Da, da, da. And the man who was interviewing them was like, okay, well, why you don't need a man? What I need a man for? I get my check every week. As long as I get my check, I'm good. Talking about welfare. I'm good. I don't need no man. Now, that's when they were amongst each other. Then they started to interview them in singles, like them, their family, the men that they had children with. And the story changed. Oh, I wish he would be there more. Oh, he don't do this for his kids. Oh, and then the man being wasteful, in my opinion, well, let me not put my opinion in it, but the man was there like, oh, she get her check. What she need me for? And there was a time, right, when the Black family was very strong, very proud, where almost 80-90% of Black children were growing up in a two-parent home. And it wasn't until welfare was introduced that the Black family became a thing of the past. And so Black conservatives believe that this notion, for example, welfare, is one of the reasons why the Black family is not as strong as it used to be, and why there's such a thing as Black victimization in this country. And that's just one piece. And that's just one documentary that I am able to share with you in this moment to articulate this piece. So the Black conservative is super interesting to me. And like I said, if there's anything that we take from this piece, is that the Black bourgeoisie and the Black conservative are very different, although some of their ideologies and lenses overlap. So I want to stop here because I want to give you some time to do some research and formulate your own opinion around this, right? But I do want to close this section with this. We have a very real systemic issue in this country that cannot be ignored. And it was carefully crafted, and we are clearly on the receiving end of it as Blacks in America. Although I don't believe in being a victim, ignoring the problem does not make it go away. Also, I would like to allude that this popular notion of the Black conservative was re-sparked by the Trump presidency. However, we have to recognize that the Black conservative is not a new idea or a new individual. We are experiencing social media where things have become exasperated, and surrounding issues of the intersection of race and politics is just like this mushroom cloud. But we do have to understand that this is not a new idea. The Black conservative has been around since the 18th century. We did the research, and the Black conservative believes that Black issues should be a part of the conservative ideology, and race should not be a means for the Black community to be a victim. They should feel empowered about being an American and having legislation passed as a result of the 1965 Civil Rights Movement Act. All right. So, we went through 40 minutes of that. I know. Guess what? We only are in section 2 right now. Now we're about to go into coonery. So we just did what is the Black conservative, all that good stuff. Now we're about to go into coonery, and we're going to talk about the perception of these types of individuals. What is the perception of the Black conservative? So I want to watch a few videos for reference, right? So I'm going to start off with this first video. And this video is a debate about a debate between Black liberals and Black conservatives. Now, this video was in 2019, and let's get into it. All right. So for the purposes of this, I just want us to watch this together, and then we'll react.
Because morally, just him as a person, as an entity, is just super corrupt, and his ideologies. I don't understand how anyone can be about it, but especially a Black person, just as an identity as a Black person, I don't understand it.
But the thing about it is that he asked you about conservatism and then you took it to Trump.
Like, girl, just say what you feel about black conservatives. Let's talk about black. So yeah, that was my.
So right now they're like discussing how black conservatives are treated in the black community. And as you can see, as soon as you hear conservative, you hear Trump. So they're going to go through a small debate. Let's tune in.
Connection, yeah.
For those of us who identify as conservative, right? I want to hear about your treatment within the black community, being an outspoken black conservative. And then I want to hear about the perceptions that you think people have of you. Whoever wants to start.
Well, I'll start with myself.
Go for it.
Because, like, so look, you're going to hear, and I'm going to let Devlin speak to the black perspective, but I'm going to speak from the gay perspective, all right? Because I came out as a black gay conservative about 6 months ago. I have been treated horribly by other gay people. The only friends that have dumped me, or quote unquote friends that have dumped me for being conservative Republican, have been the gay ones. The people who give me the most grief on social media have been the gay ones.
So right here, what we're seeing an individual who is pointing out that those whom they believe they should have allyship with are the ones who are outing them or making them feel like they are not a part of, right? So, I mean, would we argue together as a group, like, okay, is this an ideology of black bourgeoisie? And because you are not this monolith of black, you cannot be a part of this particular group. You are in the out group. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but I've seen it over and over again as I've moved to different places in the New England area. I've noticed that there's this in crowd and then there's this out crowd, but then there's the in crowd of the out crowd, which is interesting to me. Like people making hierarchies of blackness, which is so, I mean, tell me about it. I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I'm going to stop sharing this really quickly because I also have another video that I would love us to watch. So I had the privilege of coming across a documentary by the name of Uncle Tom. This documentary was on Prime Video. If you guys want to watch it, you can watch it. And it was absolutely amazing. It was a part of my research. And I figured, hey, why don't we watch some of it? So I am going to share my screen again. And as I'm sharing this, I want you guys to kind of feel me on this. Like, feel me a little bit because this is super interesting.
Or they're trying to communicate that, oh, you're just trying to fit in with white people. You're trying to be accepted among whites. And so I'm going to call you this derogatory word to put you in your place and to remind you, you will never be accepted by whites. You'll always.
Okay, so I'm having a problem. Hold on. So I don't know if it's going to let me share my screen. Oh. So Prime Video has it where you can't see the screen, but you can hear it. So let's just vibe for a second.
There's people who find my Instagram and comment on it just to call me Uncle Tom, House Negro. I never thought that I would be called, such racist and derogatory terms.
Uncle Tom, coon, bedwench,
bootlicker, chucking and jiving,
House Negro, coon,
Uncle Tom and coon. I have a coon award over there. Coon of the Year award.
They call us the coons. Coon.
For Indians like me, you're an Uncle Patel.
Uncle Ruckus.
Praise be the white God and his son, White G.
The guy from Get Out, they put his face on my post.
I find that the African American experience for me has been, for the most part, very good.
I wish you guys could see it.
I've ever been called. The most absurd thing is a black white supremacist. It's like the old Chappelle skit, Clayton Bigsby. You go, oh, it must be real.
People say crazy things. Leftists say the craziest shit to you.
Don't try to twist what I say.
But that's what you're saying.
Your narrative. That is not what I'm saying.
That is what you're saying.
You can't tell me what I'm saying.
I know you, Lenore. That's what you're saying.
You don't know me.
You sound like all of them.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and guess what? You sound like all them Uncle Tom. Now, how about that?
I knew it. Lenore,
now,
it's good to hear from you. It's good to hear from you.
Go drop dead.
All right. Dude, she wasn't a nice lady. We don't condone that on this space. We're here. We're intellectualizing. We're talking to each other. But yeah, guys, I mean, I wish you could see because the visuals are great, the way that they edited it. And it's a bunch of Black conservatives, young, old, in between, gay, straight, doesn't matter. Just a bunch of people who co-sign with, you know, conservative values and ideologies and what they look like when legislation gets passed. So I want to go back to the conversation with the young Black conservatives. And so they're talking about how they're treated in the Black community. And I want to let the brother finish before we move on to really what the disagreements on systems of oppression are when it comes to liberal and conservative ideology. So let's check this out real quick. I'm gonna let the dude finish, and then oh no, this is not the one. My bad, guys. Hold on 1 second. I don't know if you guys like this format. I like watching little movies and all that. We could watch stuff and talk to each other a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna let the brother finish.
People that call me the nastiest, all kinds of like house nigga, Uncle Tom, like all this stuff. Like these have been the gay people, or the people from the quote unquote tolerant, inclusive LGBTQ community. All right. So this is what my experience has been, and being somebody that has been an advocate and still consider myself an advocate, just not in the way that they want me to be. I was very shocked by that because I think that when I came out as conservative, they like to push forward this veneer of inclusion and tolerance, and that dropped like that. So it was the nastiest treatment that I had ever seen, and I never expected it. And you never expect that as a gay person until it happens.
From every 2 a.m.
Good old YouTube gotta hate on us, right? So yeah, even this young brother who is gay, he said he started to see most of his own affinity spaces treating him differently and being nasty towards him, which is like, it's crazy. So I want us to go into what they see as disagreements on systems of oppression and welfare and taxes and things of that nature. Because if we're going to talk about the Black conservative and we're going to speak illy of them, I mean, why don't we just figure out what they believe in, right? And so I hope you get to walk away from this video kind of learning a little bit more about what the Black conservative is. That, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I hope you can see they're not coons and they're not jigaboos and they're not all of these derogatory terms. They're just Black folks looking at the landscape of America in a different way than we've all been taught to look at it. So it's more so like, take this information and make your own thought process around this. Don't let the media tell you how you should think about people, especially our own people. So let's go into this piece. I want you guys to see how they feel about systems of oppression. So let's get into it.
Who all sell drugs. All of my cousins sell drugs. If they're not playing ball, they're selling drugs. And if they're in jail, they get
She's a conservative, by the way.
Out to sell drugs because they too old for ball. So all they know how to do is get money. So how do you tell somebody who's been getting money all they like, oh, so now I'm about to work a regular job, like we get paid and they're gonna take tax off my check, and then they don't even know where the taxes is going. So they just work 40 hours a week. They think they about to get a nice little $500 check and say $250. They're like, wait, what? I'm about to go sell drugs again. So then I have to teach them how to get out here in the legal game, and let's flip this money the right way. And again, the taxes that are placed on these businesses can either help us or hurt us. And what Trump is doing.
Did you guys see that? So remember when we were going through like what conservative ideologies look like and what types of legislation conservatives co-sign, lower taxes for citizens is one of them. And so this young lady is saying that she's in favor of that and she's a conservative because for her, that works. Okay. And that works for her and her business. She's a financial individual. She owns her own business as a financial advisor, excuse me.
It's helping me teach my cousins in the hood how to move so that they can get money and not keep busting people upside the head for money or selling drugs to people. These people that are continuously living on welfare, we're paying for it. So the more you're giving them in food stamps, the more you're allowing them to extend their lifestyle in the project, the more money is coming out of my pocket as a taxpayer, and then now it's hindering my business. When now I'm not paying that much taxes, I got more money. So now I need to say to them, yo, listen, I got 5 racks. I'm about to invest this into you so we can start working on your business. And if we're gonna let the money circulate, once it circulate, you can go out on your own. If taxes is taking that money, how can I take that 5 racks and give it to them?
That's part of my problem with Donald Trump. He's literally making the rich richer. And then what happens is that the poor have to get things for it.
Raise your hand if you agree with the statement that I'm about to make. The welfare system destroyed the black family.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they're about to get into it, but I wanted us to take some time just to see the perspective of this young lady. So I'll give you an example. I moved to Maine and I was living up there for a while. And guys, I know we're coming up on an hour. We're almost there, so stay with me. I was living up in Maine and there were some Trump supporters up in Maine, and that, you know, as far as I was concerned, I'm from a Democratic city in New York City. So I'm thinking, oh, they're just a bunch of racist white people. But when I got up there and I started to talk to them and I started to learn and I started to think, and I was like, hey, like, why do you support Trump? A lot of them supported him because of their financial status in America. They wanted to preserve their wealth. And he was someone who was helping them preserve their wealth with lower taxes and smaller government. So even this black young lady is saying the same thing as a white person up in Maine, but there are people who are looking at their finances and there are people who are looking to help their community and their legacy continue. I'm not saying that Democrats don't do the same thing, but we also have to see that perhaps a conservative might be thinking more selfishly in some ways, I'm using that word for lack of a better term, about what their finances look like. I want us to take that into consideration and feel that, right? But, you know, as you can see, Donald Trump has sparked a lot of conversation around the black conservative because people supported him. Black folks supported him in this. So we kind of got to see that dichotomy. And as you can see, they're talking about the welfare system that I brought up earlier. I wanted to show you guys the video on the Uncle Tom documentary where they did a portion of the video was about Donald Trump and his presidency. But since we can't see the visuals, we'll just move on. And I'm about to close out with you guys because now we're about to get into intellectualism. So I wanted to take a moment just to name some people that came up in this intellectualism space, this black conservative space. For example, Booker T. Washington. He has long been upheld as the original black conservative in 1896 when he issued the Atlantic Monthly, and he wrote, "The Negro has within him immense power of self-uplifting." Let that digest. 1896, Booker T. Washington, the black conservative, the original, the OG, says the Negro has within him immense power for self-uplifting. I want you guys to sit and marinate with that because throughout this entire podcast, we have never seen at one point where a black conservative said they didn't believe in the black plight. They didn't believe that they were black. They didn't believe that blackness was something that should be uplifted. More importantly, what they wanted to stress that they are American first and black after. Okay, so check this out. Thomas Sowell is an American author. I think your boy's like 93 right now. He's an economist, a political commentator, a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He was born in Gastonia, North Carolina, to a poor family, and he later grew up in Harlem, New York. He has expressed controversial views concerning race, ethnicity, economics, often earning the label of a visionary among conservatives and a scoundrel among liberals. But he believes blacks would be better off if they advance their own means. If they advance by their own means. The conservative economist harshly criticizes ideas that most black leaders hold as essential to the social and economic advancement of the race, including affirmative action, minimum wage laws, and government assistance laws. In 1981, in Newsweek described Sowell as the intellectual fountainhead of the black conservative. All right. And Ronald Reagan called him his favorite Black intellectual. While Carl T. Rowan once called him an Aunt Jemima, giving aid and comfort to America's racists. So, as you can see, we definitely have a juxtapose of how people see the Black conservative, but really, the Black conservative antagonizes all of these social ideas that we have adopted along the years that are more democratic and liberal in nature and have shown and proven to be some of the root of his systemic oppression against the Black community in this country. And then my good old girl, Candace Owens, I'm gonna close out with Candace Owens chopping up a lady. I like Candace Owens. Y'all might not like her. She keep it real. I know she got a white husband, but yo, shout out to Candace, man, because Candace doesn't believe that Black people are victims, and I can get in line with that. I don't believe in everything she says. As you know, we can't believe in everything everyone says. But if someone's speaking truth and facts, man, give credit where credit is due. So let's share this real quick, and then we're going to close out. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Let's see how Candace get down. I hope to be like this one day, you know, just letting people know what time it is.
I just have to say that I object strenuously to your use of the word hilarious. To me, this feels a lot like your reaction to being named in one of these manifestos. Now, you're of course not responsible for the words of somebody writing that document, but I do think that laughing at it is a real problem because these are.
Oh yeah, there was a bombing, and I can't remember the country the bombing was in, but the gentleman put in his manifesto, kind of like that Buffalo dude, put in his manifesto that Candace Owens opened up his eyes and enlightened him on a few things. And so she's addressing Congress right now because she was in the manifesto, and they are trying to say that her ideologies are too liberal, too radical.
These are real families that are impacted by this violence. And I think our efforts towards talking about this have to start from a place of mutual respect, which is what I've heard from this side of the table. Now, the reason we don't have those numbers, I want those numbers as much as you do. But the number, to say the numbers don't show something is simply not supported by the data.
Okay, and I have 38 seconds.
Bringing them up in this room is because it is attempt to make the election all about race as the Democrats.
Not in my case,
Please
no.
keep
Do not characterize my motive.
Mr. Chairman, it's my time. It's my time.
You've got your time spent. 3 more seconds.
Every 4 years, you bring up race, and you knew exactly what I meant when I said hilarious. You just tried to do live what the media does all the time to Republicans, to our president, and to conservatives, which you tried to manipulate what I said to fit your narrative, okay? I was not referring to the subject matter that is hilarious. I said it's hilarious that we are sitting in this room today, and I've got 2 doctors and a missus, and nobody can give us real numbers that we can respond to so we can assess how big of a threat this is. Because you know that it is not as big of a threat as you are trying to make it out to be, so you can manipulate. And the audacity of you to bring up the Christ Church shooting manifesto and make it seem as if I laughed at people that were slaughtered.
By the way, one of the board members gave his time to Candace, okay? And then put his thumb down, his hammer down, like, let your girl speak.
By a homicidal maniac is in my opinion, absolutely despicable. And I think that we should be above that.
To try to assign reality or any meaning to a homicidal maniac writing a manifesto, which, by the way, let the record show, also cited Spyro the Dragon, the child's cartoon, as a source of inspiration. He also cited Nelson Mandela as a source of information. I don't think that Nelson Mandela has inspired Boston shooting. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. You would rather assign meaning to a homicidal maniac than to actually address what I said, the things that I said today that are actually harming Black America. Number 1, father absence. Number 2, the education system and the illiteracy rate. Illegal immigration ranks high, abortion ranks high, white supremacy and white nationalism, if I had to make a list again of 100 things, would not be on it. This hearing, in my opinion, is a farce. And it is ironic that you're sitting here and you're having 3 Caucasian people testify and tell you what their expertise are. Do I know what my expertise are? Black in America. I've been Black in America my whole life, all 30 years. And I can.
Me too, honey girl. Yes, Black in America, been here, done that.
Tell you that you guys have done the exact same thing
every 4 years ahead of an election cycle, and it needs to stop.
My girl Candace. Candace be going in on the people them. A lot of people don't like Candace, but I like Candace. Yo, shout out to you, Candace. Guys, this is it for me. Take this, do with it as you please. The Black conservative. Are they really that bad? I don't know. I feel like, after going through this whole little spiel with you guys, going through this podcast, going over the definitions, watching some videos, having some jokes, closing out with our girl Candace. I mean, I feel like, it's okay to have different ideologies about Blackness and not live in a monolith. All right. It's okay to have different ways of thinking about things as a person of color. It's okay to have different ways to think about things as a white person. It's all right for us to have our own freedom of thought. All right. Obviously, don't harm anybody with it. Walk in love, be in love. But thank you for being with us today. The Black conservative. I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button so we can get through the algorithm. As you can see, all of our contacts are right above here. If you want to follow us, if you want to be a part of our family, I thank you so much. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, wherever you are in the world. Love you. Peace, love, blessings. May God smile upon you, and may heaven shine on you. Charlene, I'm out.